Hi everyone, meteorologist Brian Bennett with your update on the tropics on your Sunday, September 17th. We have three systems in the tropics right now. We have Hurricane Jose, we have Tropical Storm Maria, and we have Tropical Depression Lee. Lee is actually dying a shameful death, so we don't need to worry about Lee. Jose is heading to the north, and exactly where Jose goes will control what Maria does. Jose and Maria are a bit of a couple. In the short term, Maria is going to head towards the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, and then again, its future path depends on what Jose wants to do. All right, so here's a look at the satellite imagery for Maria. And Maria right now is a developing tropical storm and hurricane, likely later today becoming a hurricane. Not a closed center of circulation, but a lot of convection. We have that counterclockwise spin, so likely becoming a hurricane later today, possibly becoming a major hurricane as we move into the next couple of days. All right, so here's the official track from the National Hurricane Center for Maria. Winds right now, as of this update, blowing 65 miles per hour. Later today, likely becoming a hurricane. And then unfortunately, moving over the battered islands of the Lesser Antilles, where we have hurricane watches and hurricane warnings, folks like and living in St. Martin and folks in the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, they don't want to deal with this storm. They had Harvey, they had Irma, and unfortunately, they're about to have a third storm. They're about to have Maria as well. And Maria could actually be worse for Puerto Rico than Irma was if it moves right over the middle of the island, where Irma actually moved just north of Puerto Rico. Maria could actually move right over Puerto Rico with stronger winds because of the proximity to the island and also heavier rain as well. And then beyond Puerto Rico, there is quite a bit of uncertainty. Here's a look at the spaghetti model plots. Again, a good deal of certainty all the way to Puerto Rico. And then beyond that, the models don't have a clue, basically. They don't know whether it's heading to Florida, whether Maria's heading to the Carolinas, or whether, hopefully, crossing our fingers, the storm recurves out to sea and remains a storm for the fishes for the rest of its little lifetime. But that we'll have to wait and see. There are a couple of scenarios, and one of those main scenarios will be what happens with Jose. So let me show you real quick what's going to happen with Maria in the short term, and then I'll show you the possible or likely scenario with Maria into the long term. So, all right, here's Maria. It's going to head off to the west-northwest, again, likely becoming a hurricane, developing that center of circulation. And then on Wednesday, it's going to possibly move right over the island of Puerto Rico. At this point, it could be a Category 3 hurricane with winds sustained over 100 miles per hour. Again, possibly moving right over the island and then continuing off to the west-northwest, possibly scraping the northern part of the Dominican Republic. So wind, definitely a factor with Maria, especially for Puerto Rico. Rain also being a big factor as well. Here's a look at the rainfall forecast from the GFS, and the purple color there represents rain anywhere from about a foot to about 15, 16 inches of rain. So the hilly and mountainous terrain of Puerto Rico could experience some pretty bad flash flooding, especially on Wednesday and into Wednesday night, something that folks in that area will want to watch very closely. All right, so what about the long-term track and the possible impact of Maria on the United States? Well, again, that depends on what happens with Jose. So let's take a look at Jose real quick. All right, so here is Jose right here. And remember I've told you, or at least mentioned in the previous updates about Irma, how the orange color here, high pressure systems, they act like cones out in the middle of the Atlantic, and these storms want to go around these cones. They do not want to head straight for them, where the blue color represents a low or a weakness, and that is something that these storms do want to head towards. So as we look at Jose going into the future, it's going to go off to the north and then possibly scrape parts of Cape Hatteras or impacting parts of New England. The only good news about Jose at this point would be, even if it makes a landfall in New England, it's going to be a tropical storm. So, yeah, there'll be some wind and there'll be some heavy rain as well. And also, we'll definitely see some high surf in this area. But we're not looking at a devastating hurricane making landfall. Again, it would likely be a tropical storm as it's moving into some much colder waters. But now take a look at this. we have a little ridge moving in from the north, and what the GFS is hinting that could do is make Jose turn to the east, actually turn back south, and essentially do a full 360-degree loop. And what does that do? That keeps Jose, the weakness, right here in the Atlantic Ocean. So here we have a high pressure over Bermuda, the Bermuda High, and then we have another ridge approaching from the west. So the weakness where Maria is right here. Jose and Maria are essentially a couple. So Maria wants to join Jose, and as long as Jose is there, then it takes Maria on a farther easterly track, keeping it offshore of the United States, at least for the time being. So again, where Jose is very important on the track that Maria makes. And anybody from Florida to Maine should be watching Maria over the next 8 to 9 days, because it does have the potential of making landfall in the United States. All right, so that was a look at the GFS model. And again, the GFS is suggesting that Jose is going to hang out in the Northern Atlantic long enough to wait for his Maria. Here's a look at the European computer model, and again, here we have Jose. So you're looking at Jose right here. Here's Florida, the Carolinas, and heading up into Jersey and up into Maine. So the European model has Jose moving to the north and perhaps wobbling a bit to the west, where it could bring some pretty strong winds, especially out in Montauk and Long Island, and even towards parts of Cape Hatteras. But then the storm hits up against that blocking high to the north, and basically forces the storm to weaken over the cold waters of the northern Atlantic, maybe even wobbling back inland, and then diminishing over the cold waters. Well, what happens if Jose dies? It's almost like Romeo and Juliet. If Jose dies, Maria then has less of a desire to go to the north. So the European has Maria actually making a bit of a more of a turn off to the northwest. Again, remember, there's no Jose here to pull the storm up. So in this case, Maria goes into the Carolinas because Jose is not there to pull the storm that direction. So again, moving into the Carolinas is a possibility. This is just one model run. I'm not saying the storm is heading for the Carolinas, but what I am saying is that there will be several large-scale synoptic weather systems that are floating around. We have the high that could block Jose. We have the high on the Atlantic, and then obviously Jose itself that will control whether Maria makes a turn into Florida or the Carolinas, or even perhaps into parts of New England. So obviously there is a lot of uncertainty at this point, and all eyes initially should be on Jose as far as where it heads, and again, that controlling where Maria will end up going. Here's the H-Wharf model. Again, the H-Wharf did pretty well with Irma. So here is Jose riding to the north, and the H-Wharf, at least as of 12Z this morning, is suggesting that Jose could make that turn to the east and maybe even back south, keeping it in the Atlantic long enough to pull Maria up its direction. Okay, so just to kind of recap this real quick, we're looking at a good and a good and a possibly a bad scenario here. So as far as Jose is concerned, if Jose can hang out in this general vicinity right here long enough for Maria to come up, Maria's going to say, "Hey, Jose, wait for me," and head that direction. Okay? So we want Jose to hang out in this general vicinity. Now, if Jose decides that it wants to ride to the north, and then it gets blocked by that blocking high pressure and kind of wobbles around, maybe goes back to the west a little bit, and then dies, Maria then will be more tempted to make a turn off to the toward the east coast of the United States, exactly where, whether that be the Carolinas, or whether it be more towards the coast of Florida, or perhaps more towards New England, is yet to be determined. Way too many factors and way too far off to determine. Or again, Jose could head out into the Atlantic, in which case there would not be a storm to pull the storm either, and Maria's track would likely be similar. So a lot of scenarios to play out. That's the bottom line of what's happening. In the short term, pray for the folks in Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands. They've already been hammered this season several times, and they're about to receive another hurricane. Whether Maria ends up impacting the United States, that is undetermined yet, but definitely a storm that we need to watch over the coming 7, 8, 9 days. If Maria does end up making landfall in the United States, it would likely be somewhere around the 25th, 26th of September, so towards the end of September. All right, guys, that's today's update. I'll continue to monitor these storms and have an update and let you know if anything looks more ominous, or perhaps we have some good news and the storms look like they want to all stay out to sea, which I am crossing my fingers for. All right, guys, have a great and safe afternoon and evening.